up, a lot of people subscribe to the less is more theory of, hey, I just want my guys to, we're going to know what we're doing, we're going to be really good at it, we're going to go out and play fast. But, you know, if you're not just the better team athletically, like sometimes, you know, that leaves you a little vulnerable if they know what you're going to do and they're just better football players than you, right? So, you know, I don't always subscribe to the less is more, like more is more.
In this episode of Coach and Coordinator Podcast presented by Vertical Raise, we dive deep into the strategic intricacies of coaching defense with Joel Elliott, the defensive coordinator at Berry College. Berry finished the 2023 season ranked as the number 23 team in NCAA Division III. They were the number 2 team in tackles for loss, number 12 in defensive TDs, number 16 in third down defense, number 19 in first down defense, number 25 in passing defense efficiency, and number 27 in total defense, holding teams to 267 yards per game. Coach Elliott challenges the common belief of less is more and advocates for a comprehensive installation process during camp. He emphasizes the importance of preparing for various scenarios by installing various defensive calls and coverages, equipping his team with diverse answers for different game situations. Coach Elliott highlights the necessities of ensuring players understand the rationale behind each defensive call, which helps simplify their decision-making on the field. He discusses the strategic approach to camp installation, advocating for daily incremental new defensive calls, blending new installs with recall from previous days, and rejecting block learning in favor of a more holistic and flow-based learning approach. In the conversation, we also explore the practical implementation of technology in practice sessions and stress the importance of acclimating players to in-game tech utilization. Be sure to stay tuned for the Winning Edge takeaways following the episode. On today's episode, we're going to talk about the idea of integrating things, especially when we install in camp, and doing that within the context of the game, because when we look at what's going to happen later in the season, we may need some answers. We may need some things that we install in camp, and the idea of less is more doesn't always apply. And we're going to get into that today with our guest, Joel Elliott, who's defensive coordinator at Berry College. So, Joel, great to have you here on the podcast.
Yeah, great to be here.
So this concept of less is more, we talk about it all the time. I always talk about simplifying things. But as you and I were talking before we got going, I think you brought up an important point, and certainly one I ascribe to, is that you can't leave yourself short of answers. And so you have to prepare for some things. And really that happens in camp. That if you are going to have some overage, if you are going to install more, not smart to do it in season during a game week, but during camp, looking ahead and saying, hey, what are the things we're going to need over the course of the season?
Yeah, for sure. So, like you brought up, a lot of people subscribe to the less is more theory of, hey, I just want my guys to, we're going to know what we're doing, we're going to be really good at it, we're going to go out and play fast. But if you're not just the better team athletically, like sometimes that leaves you a little vulnerable if they know what you're going to do and they're just better football players than you, right? So I don't always subscribe to the less is more, like more is more. I mean, during camp, we're really pushing our guys. We're going to try to install a bunch of calls and really get after it. And if you're 18 and it's your first year in college, like it goes really fast, and that's okay. You know, if they can't get it, then they'll get caught up in spring ball. But we're going to try to install a lot of different coverages, different blitzes, whatever it is, because we play a bunch of different styles of offenses. So we need to have different answers, right, for any problems that arise during the season. And we do a lot on defense, right? It may look like a lot. Now, the trick is trying to find a way to keep it as simple as possible for your guys. When we teach our coverages, like there's a lot of carryover in techniques. Hey, if we're playing 3 weak and then we have 3 weak and then we have 3 cloud into the boundary, well, okay, that we're changing it. Hey, this is the same as call for 8 people on the field. We're just changing the structure into the boundary, right? So for 8 people, it's the same call, but it still looks different to the quarterback. It looks different to the offense. So we try to keep it simple by just manipulating a few people and changing their techniques. But getting back to more is more, right? We're always trying to install a bunch because you never know when you're going to need something. And hey, we may install something day 7 of camp, but we're not going to use it till week 4 or 5 just because we need that answer against whatever style of offense we're playing. And it's better to install in camp and have that done so that when you use it week 5, there's recall from your guys. So you can always go back and teach them, hey, remember, we did this we installed this, we've practiced it. Here's the practice film of it. You guys can remember. And then you go in week 5, whatever it is, and those guys have some recall and it's not totally brand new to them. Because I think a lot of times it always happens when you go back and do your self scout, like you're in game week and you're tired, you're doing a lot of hours, and hey, we don't do this, but this looks really good. Let's put this coverage in, this front end, whatever it is. And then you go back and self scout, and like inevitably you called it 3 times and you were 0 for 3 on it. It never worked out, right? So if you have stuff that you're able to bank in and get reps with your guys in fall camp, and then you pull it back out later in the year, like I found that you're going to have more success with it because those guys have that recall and they're able to understand it and obtain some information at least.
Yeah, there's definitely an art to figuring out how much you need. A lot of that is done in your off-season study, knowing what you're going to face during the year, even putting together kind of a flow of what that season might look like, at least with the information you have. Now, teams can change. They might do something different that you didn't expect or become a different type of team. But your point being is that you have to have enough, right? There's always going to be overage, but the best plan is to have that installed. And I think something you said there is important, that you try to keep it as simple as possible for your players. So this isn't saying we're going to overwhelm them with all these complex ideas. We're just going to make sure they know how to apply it to all the situations that they need. So that I've always said, I want to be as simple as possible for our players, but as complex as we can be for the opposing team, right? And so that means if you're really good at it, you're creating a structure that handles those things that you're going to need over the course of the year. And probably best practice for that is, like you said, we're going to install this in camp. We may not get to it. We may not use it again till week 4, 5, 6, 7, but we don't want that to be the first time that we're doing. We don't want to go back to camp during the season.
Absolutely. And I think the other thing too is we install all this stuff, try to give the why behind why we're doing it so that our guys understand what we're trying to accomplish, right? So when we install cover 2, I'm going to tell our guys, hey, all right, we're playing cover 2 right now. We got a light run box. So, all right, guys, do you think I'm calling this because I think they're running the ball or I think they're throwing the ball? And especially our older guys, like they know, hey, cover 2, right? We're thinking passing this situation. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the run fit, right? Just tackle the ball for 5 or 6 yards. If they run the ball, let's go play the next play. No big deal, right? Hey, this is a 3rd down call for us, right? This is a 3rd and 8 call. I'm not going to spend any time teaching you guys run fits on this call, right? Because that would be a waste of time. What run should we get? We're going to react to draw. Let's tackle it before they get 8 yards, right? So just helping our guys understand too the purpose of each call and what it's meant for, I think eases the burden on them of like what they should be looking for and just limits, right, their responsibility. Like, hey, cover 2, right? I'm not thinking a lot about this run fit here. I just got to tackle the ball for 5 yards, right? So just giving them information that way, I think helps too, so that they're not overloaded thinking, okay, this is my run fit, it's my pass responsibility, all that type of stuff.
In looking at the framework of your install, there's a lot of things that have become popular. And sometimes what's popular on one side of the ball makes it over to the other side of the ball. And so one popular thing in install is the 3-day install. I studied it extensively, honestly, never used it. It didn't fit. I think we might have tried it in camp, the way we wanted to do things and think of how we wanted things layered in situationally, things layered in with personnel. Didn't work in a pure form like that for us. So what's your approach to the format of what your install is going to look like?
Yeah, so we're going to install 3 to 4 new calls every day for probably the first. I was actually talking about this with our offensive coordinator yesterday. We were mapping out our camp schedule, but I think like our first 8 or 9 days, we're going to have 3 to 4 calls in every day. And we're especially front loading our install and getting everything in. But when I go through, I try to have, so day 1, right, we're going to have our 3 calls. We're going to run those 3 calls 100% of the time. Day 2, we're going to put 4 new calls in. And the way I try to do it is about 75% of the new install, 25% recall for that practice, right? So, hey, day 2, we're going to have 7 calls in, but what's the emphasis going to be? Obviously what we just installed, but it doesn't mean you can just forget what day 1 install was. And like you talked about that 3-day block, 4-day block, right? So if you're on offense or defense and you're on a 4-day block to where, hey, we're going to run these coverages, these runs, these pass concepts, whatever it is, and then go to day two, and we're not going to run those plays for another 4 days. Like you may get really good that day learning what you're supposed to do, but I think it hurts you in the long run. Like we were talking about earlier, I worked for Mike McIntyre. I was a GA at Memphis when he was the D coordinator. He's now the head coach at FIU, but one off season, he had us read this book. I can't remember what it's called, but it was a guy training soccer players over in Europe and teaching them. But one of the big things that stuck with me was talking about block learning, right? Where you take, hey, we're on a 4 day block and we're going to do this install one day, the next install day two, and only focus on that, or I'd only focus on the next day's install day three. And hey, day five, we're going to come back to day one because we finished our 4 day block. Well, that's not how the game is played, right? I'm not going to, when I go through my cut up of practice or a game, I'm not going to sort it by all the quarters. I'm not going to sort it by all the cover three. We're going to watch it in the flow of the game because I don't call 15 straight plays of quarters. I don't call 15 straight plays of cover three, right? We're going to go from quarters to cover three to a blitz to cover two to man free. All right. So I don't want our guys thinking, okay, these are all the quarters. Okay, these are all the covers three. Like they need to have the ability to bounce back and forth between calls every single play when we're learning because that's how the game is called. All right. So, but anyways, this book that we read, he was just talking about how that block learning, it's going to be good for the first few days, but eventually there's diminishing returns when compared to the people who are constantly in, like how we install on defense, right? We do 75% install, 25% recall, because if you're just doing something for one day and you don't come back to it for 4 days later, how good are you getting at it, right? So by practice 8, 9, 10, like our guys on defense, man, they get really good at day 1, 2, and 3 install because we've run it a bunch already because we're still having that recall every single day. So I just think that's really important to install that way because I think by practice 10 or 11, we're going to be really on top of it compared to some people who do that block install where they don't run something for 4 or 5 days.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. That's where it never fit for me was that exact thing. I mean, I really believe the game is always played in context. You have to create those situations like that. Certainly, when you look at your initial install in those first 3 days, I mean, it's going to be the things that you're going to run the most.
For sure.
Like you said, and I like that percentage, like 25% of that still being like the stuff we previously did, getting the reps on that. Doesn't mean you're de-emphasizing the newer stuff, but also thinking about how you're putting that within a progression too, that up front, these are the foundational plays or these are the foundational calls for us. This is what we hang our hat on. And then as we get into things, like we're still going to be repping those things we want to do the most, but start layering in the others and other things too, like your different situations, the application of it. Where are you using it on the field? What are the downs and distances? I mean, I was telling you back to just thinking of how, and even my initial coaching of the game, playing the game and coaching the game in high school was put the ball on the 35 and wear out that patch of field all season long, right? Because you're not moving the ball all over the place to the point where I understood like that's not a good way of doing things and that I want chains out and that I want to understand sometimes as well time in the game and even thinking about score differential in the game and layering that into the thought processes, right? You need your players to be aware of those things because it does affect how the game is played.
And I also think too, just like and obviously fall camp's the best time to do it, but hey, there's obviously times like, hey, we're running, all right, we're going to put the ball in the 35. This is a 12 play period, whatever it is. We're going to run all first and second down plays. Like, that's great. Okay, hey, this is a red zone period. This is a third down period. We're going to get all our third down work in. All right, that's great. But there's something to where, hey, all right, let's put the ball down. We're going to do a drive, first, second, third down. Like, let's get all the coaches off the field. We don't need coaches standing in the back reminding guys what they're supposed to do. Like, let's get good at playing football. Let's get out there. Let's see who can play, who can process information, right? Because we're not standing out there on Friday night or on Saturday. So there's got to be times during practice too where you can't be standing in the back. Hey, you need to widen out here, fix your split, whatever it is. Like, let's go see who can play, right? Who's got a concept of what's going on so that you know who you can trust on Friday night or Saturday.
Yeah, definitely. I know I've talked to coaches more and more, and I see more doing it, just those call it periods where the head coach might be the only one who knows what the situation is going to be. And he's going to work his coordinators on it. And I think it's just good practice. You think about it as coaches, we need our reps too.
100%.
So to say, hey, we're going to take 5 or 10 minutes and we're going off script. What are you going to call? Right. That gets you into the flow of the game too, and making sure you're on top of it and you're prepared. And removing those things that that don't happen on game day. Like you defensive guys are good at covering the post. And I mean the defensive secondary coaches, not your
Oh yeah,
necessarily your secondary, right? There's always someone there in the middle of the field. I mean, it could be a bit of distractor, obviously, for the quarterback. That's actually not the picture he's going to see with 3 or 4 guys standing. And you know how it works. You're back there, then a defensive back wants to know something between his series, and then there ends up being 4 guys back there
yep,
watching it. It's like drives you crazy. So the other thing, I was out at a practice a couple weeks ago and told the coach, like, they're working on putting in their boots and nakeds. I said, you are training your quarterback to cut everything short, because look at where everybody is standing here. I mean, they're at 10. He needs more depth. He's feeling you guys there. He's cutting everything short. Like, you need everybody back to 15 yards because it's not even the right feel for him. And you're
for sure.
training him to do that. So, yeah, I love that idea. I think it's very useful in camp. And I was like that where I would script all my thirds. But as the week went on, we wanted to be sure that we either simulated drives in that script or we would get to some of those call it type of periods. So I think there's multiple ways you could do it, but I think you make some good points here, and just the approach to learning that blocking it might be good for initial learning, but we have to move away to that and make it more realistic to the game. And I know you said even when you watch film, you take that approach as well.
Sure. And I think one thing too that's been good for us on defense is, hey, I'm sure we're similar to everyone else in America. Hey, first and second down for a Tuesday practice is what we're going to be focused on, right? All the base down stuff. Third down and red zone is a Wednesday practice for us where we work all those situations. Well, Thursday, I mean, we split up offense, defense, and we take our scout teams and we get about 40 minutes of scout work. But the way I script our scout period on Thursday is, hey, we'll go first, second, third down with the ones, and then we'll bring the twos, and we'll go first, second, third down, first, second, third down. Because on Thursday, I'm trying to get those guys in the flow of a game. So it's not like on Tuesday, hey, we're just working all base down calls, or on Wednesday, it's a third down period. Like I want those guys to get in the flow of the game on a Thursday practice so that on Saturday they're ready to go.
In one other aspect of this, as things change, especially at the college level, I think some high schools are used to having the technology on game day. The college level now, the rules have changed. You're able to do that. And was talking to a defensive coordinator the other day and gave him the recommendation that make sure you're working that technology and how it works within the flow of a game in practice. The
Yep.
last thing you want is to come out on game day and say, we're just using this technology on game day. So like you're saying right there, hey, if we're working first, second, third down, at some point that one group is coming off the field, let's have our technology out in practice. I'm not sure if you guys can use it in your league. I know there's different
Yeah, we
conference.
can. We're going to be working through all
Yeah.
that red tape here soon.
So yeah, and I think I first heard this Rob Everett, who's now with the Miami Dolphins. I think at the time he was either at Bridgewater College or he might have still been at the high school level. He's an analyst with the Dolphins now, but talked about one thing he worked into practice was adjustment periods. So they would come off the field after their set and have a coach, could be the coordinator, could be someone else. I would recommend whoever's on the sideline should be them, but they would actually take a few minutes, go over what their adjustments were. Now you can use that film, show them whatever your setup is going to be on game day, have them sit down that same way. Whoever's going to be doing the talking, do the talking, go over it, show it to them. Here's a few things we're seeing. Get them used to that flow of the game, get off the field, sit down. Here's what we're going over. Okay, we're done. We're up again. Let's get back in there. So think about those things, especially at the college level. It's all new. Don't make the mistake of waiting too long to start installing that with your team too. I mean, I've always liked, for a long time, I utilized the instant replay in practice because what I was doing to write for different USA Football, American Football Monthly, AFCA, people would give me that technology just so I would write about it, but I would use it in practice. And it's amazing like how much you can get out of have an iPad in your hand as a coach right underneath your script, and in between as the call's going in, look at a few things so you can correct it right there and then. But as I'm saying at the same time, now working into your practice as well.
Yeah, for sure. No, this is the first year it's allowed in college football, so we're going to definitely be working everything out during camp and during our inter squad scrimmages and all that stuff, and trying to make sure
Yeah.
we're all on the same page of how it's working.
Changes the whole flow of your communications and thought processes in game now that you're using it. So I think it's an exciting rule change for the game, but definitely going to take some thought process.
For sure.
Well, Joel, I really appreciate you taking the time here and sharing these ideas with us. Some very useful stuff here as you think about how you're going to install things during camp, and certainly want to wish you and Barry the best of luck here in 2024.
Awesome. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Here are winning edge takeaways and ideas for implementation. 1. Be comprehensive in your installation during camp. Coach Elliott emphasizes the importance of installing a wide array of defensive calls and coverages during camp. By front-loading the install process, you can prepare for various scenarios that you might encounter throughout the season. This approach ensures that even if certain calls are not used immediately, they will be familiar to your players when needed later in the season. 2. Have daily increment and recall of defensive calls. Coach Elliott advocates for a balanced approach to installations, with about 75% of practice time focused on new installs and 25% on recalling previous installs. This method prevents block learning, where concepts are isolated for several days, and instead promotes a more holistic, flow-based approach to learning. This incremental and continuous reinforcement helps your players retain and apply your strategies more effectively. And 3, be sure to integrate technology into practice. Coach Elliott highlighted the practical implementation of technology during practice sessions. By using instant replay and adjustments during periods in practice, your players can acclimate to how the technology will be used on game day. This simulation of game scenarios with technology optimizes decision-making and strategic adaptations on the field, ensuring a seamless transition to actual game situations. Be sure to check out the 10% Toolkit. Explore these pages for helpful tips, a winning edge, and special promotions for Coach and Coordinator podcast listeners. The link is in the show notes. Sign up for a weekly tip sheet which shares the best ideas of each week, and follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.